Hello and welcome to today's session. I am Moana Beals, the VP of Strategic Accounts at ID5, and I'm delighted to welcome two key industry players, both of whom are from Adform. I'm going to hand over and allow you to introduce yourselves, and then we can dive into the conversation.
Thank you, Moana. My name is Lucia Mastromauro. I'm the VP for Global Client Partnerships at Adform, working with our biggest agencies and brands.
Hi, I'm Jacob Back. I'm one of the co-founders in Adform, so I've been with Adform and the industry for around 18 years now. I focus on the big challenges and the big opportunities that are sort of in the industry. So I spent, after spending maybe 1.5 years on GDPR as one of my main focuses, I spend 1.5 years now focusing mainly on identity, and so hopefully have some relevant data points for you in this talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Adform are a critical player in this space, and I think on the forefront of platform development when it comes to paving a new path towards our collective cookieless future. So I'm really excited today to take a dive into the infrastructure, the strategy, and to hopefully hear about some of the results that you've seen and gained from operating within this first-party context. So let's begin. But let's not begin at the very beginning. Let's begin at the here and now. Where are we as an industry on this digital identity journey? And do you think the industry is really aware of the issues that lie ahead if we lose functions such as attribution and frequency controls, which will be challenged due to the lack of a persistent identifier? Over to you guys.
Yeah, let me start. Thanks a lot for inviting us here. Well, to your question, I think it's a little bit all over the scale. I mean, for example, I think we are quite far ahead than most of our peers in terms of already being, live and trading actively without cookies on first-party IDs like ID5 and related linked first-party data. But I'm not personally, satisfied, and I want more every day from our teams, because the clock is ticking down, and we can't be sure that Chrome will not shut off cookies sooner than expected, for example. And also, I mean, we have a big issue already on Safari and Firefox. So while outside you could say that we're doing well, I mean, I don't even think that's good enough. We have to all do more. So looking at the rest of the industry, I definitely think we are not where we should be, and I think, I mean, one of the reasons for that is probably a lack of understanding of what are the possible solutions. I mean, especially at a technical level. I mean, as simply as what is a first-party cookie and or first-party ID and what does that solve for, etc.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. It's this window that we have, and we need to capitalize on that from a time perspective, right? So how do you think the publishers, the platforms, the brands, how do you think they should interact during this period and as we transition into the cookieless piece? What are the conversations? What should they be doing?
Well, basically, I think we need more action. A lot of people think about the demise of third-party cookies as 2022, but as Jakob has just kind of hinted at it, there are danger that it could come much sooner, and is a big issue in many markets where 50% of the impressions are Safari or Firefox. So it's not an issue of the future. The way that that we think the interactions, especially from publishers, should be happening is by implementing first-party IDs, linking those to first-party data, and then making those two ingredients available to brands and agencies through platforms like Adform, which are already ready and transacting in first-party IDs, to make all this happen and make that data available to brands. I think brands need to push publishers more, because it does start there, and I think it's a real urgency for the industry. If you think, I was speaking at another conference a couple of weeks ago, and I used an analogy that I will repeat here. If you think of a game of Jenga, you have multiple blocks all aligned. You have the DSP, SSPs, ad servers, data, impressions, all kind of balanced. And right now, as an industry, everything balances on the piece for third-party cookies. Now, Adform has gone ahead. We have deconstructed our platform, rebuilt it, and we've replaced that piece with first-party ID. We actually replaced it with what we call a cross ID engine. So it doesn't matter what ID solution you use, send it to us, we will understand it. Our engine understands it. So we have great partners of ID5, for example, and been working with you guys. And it's great that you guys are pushing the industry. And we are seeing a lot more IDs now that we did 2 months ago. But if you imagine that last piece in the Jenga game being third-party cookies for the majority of ad tech players out there, as soon as you pull that block, everything collapses. And I think there is a real urgency for everybody there. We are happy that we are a little bit ahead of the curve there, but we want everybody as an industry to move forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just touched on the platform element there, but I think you as a platform have a great perspective, given that you have both the SSP, the DMP, and the DSP. I imagine there's different priorities amongst those pieces. So how do you align those competing priorities? And do you focus identity efforts across one side of the platform, or do you look at it holistically? How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and oddly enough, I mean, we actually, at some time last year, we started building simultaneously on the SSP, the DSP, the DMP, and also the ad server. And that may sound odd, but this was because, you know, there weren't really any you know, technologies ready for transacting on first-party IDs. So we sort of had the opportunity to do it all ourselves. And this is probably also why we are quite, you know, quite early to the market, because we do have this end-to-end capability. So that being said, of course, we didn't, you know, fully implement everywhere, and now we focused. I mean, from the beginning, we just focused on making programmatic trading and targeting able to run without cookies. So using ID5 and other IDs, because that was sort of the low-hanging fruit and also the most important one to plug first. And we still, of course, have plenty of development left, especially in the ad server and DMP that we are now for the rest of this year and first half of next year will, you know, need to update things like our dynamic creative DCO engine, etc., to also use first-party IDs and data.
So what comes next out of those pieces that you just mentioned? What's the next kind of priority from your side?
Well, so the priority has so far been definitely the trading and targeting. You know, getting the first-party data in, trading in the DSP, frequency capping, all those sort of things. So those things we have completed. We're still making, you know, improvements, of course. For example, on the algorithms, it's not all our algorithms, but most of them that are now using first-party ID. So that's where the focus is. And we have sort of the ad serving part. We've just done some reporting things, just, you know, so the basic reporting is there, and now the more advanced reporting, attribution, etc., will come afterwards, and it's a similar story for the DMP. So I think, I mean, you could say that we prioritize the DSP. The SSP was very simple, so that one was very simple. That's mainly just about being able to pass IDs like ID5, etc. But yeah, the priority was the DSP, and then after that the DMP and ad server.
Okay. Fantastic. So you've recently launched Flow. Can you talk to us about that tech and how the role of identity plays into Flow?
Yeah, sure. So for us, Flow is a huge step forward in two main fronts, I would say. One is the workflows itself. Last week, PwC came to the market stating that our workflows are 50% faster than our previous stack. So we did constructed the entire stack and rebuilt it from the ground up, which is great to have an independent kind of rubber stamp there. But the other main point is identity, really, because, as I said, the industry all boils down to one common denominator, which is third-party cookies. What we've done with Flow is take apart our entire tech stack end to end and rebuild it from the ground up. So the common denominator is not third-party cookie, but it is an exponential kind of amount of identity signals that we can see, like ID5, for example. So we call it a sort of an AI-powered cross-ID engine, but that is the foundation of Flow, which then goes to enable all our products, DSP, SSP, DMP, ad server, DCO, all to understand, be fluent in third-party cookies, but as well as in first-party identity data. and this has been phenomenal for us. It's particularly useful because we are already transacting on first-party data. We are already transacting with ID5 as well. And in a world where there is no third-party cookies, for example, like Safari and Firefox, is really useful for us because we do operate in markets where those browsers are 50% of the impressions in markets. So we are seeing our publishers around those markets being very, very happy because suddenly the yield is going up and they are getting a much fairer CPM for their impressions, which before were completely valued on the ground when they were really valuable impressions. And also enabling frequency capping, reporting, and so on, which is very good.
Yeah, absolutely. And great to hear on the performance side of things. So we've touched on this a little already, but we're partners of yours. Can you talk to us about the integration with ID5 and how you're using the ID at the moment?
Yeah, I can talk to that. So our platform uses it by default. So that's, I think, it's good news. It's not something that you have to go and find a button, etc. I mean, and we use it by default for quite a few things. So, for example, frequency capping is one. Audience targeting, if there is audiences linked to it. I mentioned the algorithms already. So all algorithms that we have use it except those that are using like client-side tracking data. This is something we have not yet released, but that's coming soon, except for the reporting part. That part, as I talked a little bit about, that we have that on that side. So it's actually quite a few places. One use case that I'm not aware that has been used yet, which is already then possible as well, is the transparency that the ID5 or other publisher IDs give, because suddenly, for the first time ever, there is an ID you can see all the way from the publisher, from what was bought, all the way to the advertiser who bought it, or to the agency who bought it. And so, using that for transparency, I think that's an exciting use case that I hope will be seen soon.
Yeah, if I may jump in here, you touched on a great point, Jakob, because as we've seen with the ISBA report, PwC doing auditing our platform, with a solution like ID5 and Adform, a brand can actually audit or allow auditors like PwC to audit the entire journey of that impression and ensure that the publisher actually are getting the compensation that they report, because there is a common denominator there, end to end. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's kind of move to the operational side of things. Who owns identity within Adform? Is it a specific team? And also, are you looking at this from a global perspective, or are you looking at this from a market by market perspective?
So I would have a more interesting answer a year ago on that, where it was limited. But I mean, now it touches, I would say, most departments, almost all. So obviously, product and development have for a long time been owning and doing a lot in this area. But since we went live with with first publishers and campaigns in the early summer, our commercial arms, client service, etc., is now spending significant time on educating clients, rolling it out, etc. And on the global versus local perspective, I think it's almost all markets, have a plan for rollout with publishers, etc., etc. Marketing, webinars, except maybe some of the really small ones, like for example, I'm not sure we're doing it in South Africa, for example, but basically everywhere else, there is also a local plan for what they need to do.
Okay, great. And I think I know the answer to this one, but do you view identity as a strategic opportunity or just a challenge?
I think I would say both. In general, answering as an industry, but also answering as Adform. I think at the beginning we saw it as a challenge. As I mentioned, the journey to building Flow started 3 years ago. About 2 years ago, we started deconstructing it. And the past year, we spent a lot of our development resources on building all the components to be identity first. So it is a challenge for anyone to any ad tech provider to really make sure that their technology is future proof. It will take investments, which in a time of COVID, it's not really, guaranteed that everybody will have. So there is a massive challenge there. For us, there was an extra challenge because we operate, we are a global company, but we have probably market leading share in markets where Safari is 50% of all impressions, like the Nordics, Germany, and so on. So for us, there was an extra challenge there that made us move very fast. And we are very happy that since June, we are now transacting. Flow is already transacting, trading, targeting without cookies. On many of those markets, we are extending proof of concepts globally, not just in Europe, but also in the US. The one thing that we would wish is that clients would be a bit more forthcoming on talking about it and going on record about the success that they are seeing. But I think there is the challenge element, which is obviously investment, but the opportunities, being an early mover in a space like this will guarantee that you can really tread the waters, and you are not, as a brand especially, you are not at the mercy of one big player or another, or being the casualty of the battle of titans in a way.
Yeah, and maybe I can just add, to another challenge and opportunity. I think an opportunity that is overseen here is that the third-party cookie is actually pretty bad nowadays. It's not living that long anymore. Linking and matching IDs is pretty pure. So actually, there is quite a few advantages of first-party IDs and first-party cookies that have not been talked so much about, but especially for big publishers, etc. So I think there's just in that fact alone that we're switching to a better currency, there's an opportunity in general in that. But there is a huge challenge on the engineering side, in the complexity and exponential growth of IDs, as there are, with all these separate ID spaces for different publishers, for different markets, for different ID types, et cetera, et cetera. So that is something that is for now we're doing fine, but down the line in a year when most publishers have enabled this, it will be a challenge, and companies like us will have to start prioritizing, for example, bigger domains over smaller, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So privacy is a really crucial element to all of this. Arguably, that's why we're in this position right now. So how does privacy play into your stack, and how do you manage it when you tackle identity in this new context?
Yeah, that's actually, in my opinion, not as big a challenge as it may sound to people. And it's very often the first question we get when we talk about this topic. And my simple answer is, well, it's basically the same as before, or as with third-party cookies. GDPR, and thereby TCF or CCPA, it applies to all IDs, whether it's a third-party one, it's a first-party one, it's a unified one, it's a login ID, it's an email, it's an IP address. So that's the short story. But that being said, the switch to first-party IDs like ID5 actually brings much better privacy and compliance possibilities, etc., because we don't have hundreds of cookies anymore, because the e-privacy regulation doesn't really apply to the same extent. So there are some advantages rather than disadvantages.
Absolutely. And you've talked to this a little bit already, but we're in this transition phase, right? So third-party cookies are still available in some cases, but not everywhere. So, and you mentioned a priority system, and perhaps you're not there yet, but do you have a priority system between the various ID vendors that you're working with? Or what's the plan around that? Is there a plan around that?
Yeah, we don't see that many IDs from that many different vendors. ID5 is definitely one of the big ones. So yes, we do have a sort of we're not asking clients, as I said, to configure these things. So our machines will make some decisions, and of course, in some cases we would use the first-party ID, or we would use the third-party ID if they're both there, which is actually more common than not, because Chrome is still operating well with third-party cookies, but we would always get a first-party ID as well if it's a first-party cookie, for example. So, and in other cases, actually a combination of the two can be used. So with frequency capping, if the first-party cookie, which as I explained, live a lot longer, or the first-party login ID, if that says, well, this user has actually seen this ad 10 times over the last month, but the third-party cookie says, well, I'm only 2 days old and I've only shown the ad, twice. well, then of course the first party ID should win, and the impression should be capped, for example. So it's quite a bit of a combination, and there isn't like one rule that fits all when it comes to all the different components in attribution, targeting, etc., etc.
Yeah, and I imagine the learnings that you're. Sorry, Lucia, go for it.
And just to complement, I mean, Jakob is the technical mind in the call, but I think you also ask in terms of, as a company, do we have a priority list, like a roadmap of to whom we are integrating with? I think the difference is there that we already built a system that whatever ID you throw at us, we can understand it. It kind of sits in the middle, translating between the IDs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you've mentioned a few of the learnings so far, but can we explore that in a bit more detail? So you're integrated with shared IDs like the ID5 ID, and you've mentioned some publisher benefits, but can you talk to any of other results that you may have gained thus far?
Well, I mean, I'm an engineer, so for me it's quite simple. I mean, it's just very, very basic that you can do frequency capping on Safari. I mean, it's like and of course that you can turn into all sorts of percentages, and what does that mean for your campaign? But for me, that's just very simple. You do frequency capping or you can't do it, right? I mean, you can do fraud detection or you can't do it very well. I mean, so it's actually quite a lot of these sort of thing. Or you can do data targeting, like we've done, like where the publisher has some audience, and suddenly you can target that audience, which you couldn't before on Safari. So that's my simple answer is sort of, it's just either you can do something or you can't. But of course, I mean, we are working on as Lucia said, to get some of our clients, like advertisers, to share some of their learnings, and because of course it's great results, that when you can suddenly do something you couldn't before, right?
Yeah. So primarily the ability to recognize more users in the cookieless environment and be able to frequency cap, etc. And then I assume also with that later on, the CPMs, the win rates, you've already mentioned fraud, etc. But that will be kind of the secondary part to this journey, is looking at the performance specifically, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, before that really kicks in, of course, you need to have quite a lot of advertisers bidding for the same things, etc. But I mean, already, of course, publishers are reporting, as you probably hear more than we do, but that they are getting quite some benefit from this.
That's a phenomenal result. So let's kind of move to the future. Do you have a wish list for the future when it comes to identity?
Yeah, I mean, on my list I have three things: scale, scale, scale. I mean, for me, that's what comes first. We are seeing pretty good, I mean, and better than expected, percentages of first-party IDs and ID5 IDs. But I mean, obviously, we would like a lot more, because there is nothing that should hold that back. I mean, we're not talking about the implementing emails and things like this. So it's relatively simple. I mean, as you can probably talk to implement these sort of things. So scale is definitely by far on the top of my list. I feel quite comfortable with the privacy, as I talked to, for example. I think both regulators and consumers should actually be happy with, that third-party cookies are going away, and the first-party IDs bring some advantages to them. You're not tons of cookies everywhere. When you opt out, it should actually be remembered, because it's not 100 opt-outs you need to do, etc. So I feel quite happy on most of the other things. But I would say, though, in my sort of wish, I have some fears for some of the broadcasting of emails that are being played with in the industry, and that is also happening. And I mean, it's definitely it's opened up some really fantastic use cases for us. But I do have this fear that some PR disaster waiting to happen, or the regulator starting to say, wait a second, in Europe in particular, right? So that one, we have to be careful with how we do that in the industry. That's at least on my wish list.
Just to clarify, we are not broadcasting emails as Adform, by the way, but it's scenarios that we do worry about. I think from my point of view, just to add a thought to Jakob's, and as I hinted before, with innovation, testing and learning and talking about the learnings that you have, I think it would be great for brands, publishers, agencies to come to the market, not just with a press release we've done it, but talk more about how they are experimenting in this space and allowing their partners to also have the permission to share some of the great data and cases that we are seeing as well. So I think, reduce the fear there to talk about some of the great results that are in place right now already.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Get the transparency element in terms of performance, I think, is critical. So, what are you looking to us for in 2021? And when I say us, I mean identity vendors in this space.
I think from from as a vendor, as a ad tech vendor like Adform, one thing that we have seen you guys do a tremendous amount and would love to see a lot more of it is educating the industry. I think we can all, we will only, as an industry, we will only get to the end of 2021 into 2022 strong as a sort of a united independent industry if people really understand what we are talking about. And identity is still a very confusing kind of subject. Even those that are very knowledgeable in this space sometimes, coming to conversations with a frame of mind that they assume that your position will be X. Like, for example, Adform going to a lot of meetings where they assume that we're going to talk about the Adform ID, which we don't. It's not our strategy. We are not releasing an Adform ID. We've built our system to be able to read IDs from any countries, any vendors, etc. But sometimes that, I think, can be a roadblock a little bit to evolving the conversation and actually getting to do meaningful things and moving to actually action. So more education, more bringing the industry together, I think would be great. And you guys have done a lot on that respect. And I mean, I don't want to be too cheeky, but please do not sell your company in 2021 to anybody who's, slightly evil. Stay independent, stay strong. I think that would be my wishes. I don't know, Jakob, if you have any particular one.
No, that's a good ask.
I'll take that one back. Yeah.
No selling to evil, Matthew.
Okay, did you hear that, Matt? Yeah, we definitely think neutrality is key to this, specifically with identity, of course. So last question for you both. What does success look like?
I mean, I can just repeat what Jakob said, right? Scale,
Yeah.
scale, and scale of IDs, both in the, publisher front. I think that's where everything sort of starts, but also advertisers and agencies starting to test. I think that would be kind of this first step of success. And for me, I think, thinking a little bit more philosophically about things, it is a little bit of a better world, which I think Jakob has hinted as well about. Identity allows for a more compliant and privacy first world that cookies don't. I think we can move into a better world by doing that, and sort of in a way that my hope is that operating in a better framework, even though it will require a lot of investment and pain into 2021 for a lot of vendors, it will allow advertisers and agencies, which are currently being disintermediated from their consumers because data ownership is moving to just a handful of players, which are, walled gardens in our space. So they are being disintermediated from the relationship with their consumers, being able to actually go back to a world where they have a direct relationship with their consumers, that they can operate in a privacy compliant manner, but have the control to engage with their agencies. And I'm a great believer that sort of independent vendors coming together to strengthen each other will therefore make the industry a much better and stronger industry. So if we can, bring to the market solutions that restore that control to the hands of those that matter, which in my view are the clients, agencies and brands, the consumers and the publishers, which depend heavily in this industry, I think we will be, I cannot paint a better view of success in my mind. I don't know, Jakob, if you have anything.
Well, you said you were going to repeat what I said, but I'm actually going to repeat some of what you said. So we're going into an endless loop here, maybe. No, I actually think success looks better than the world we come from, and that is based on how successful Facebook is. Facebook is super, super successful because they operate in a first-party world where IDs last as long as the consumer is on the platform. The data becomes a lot stronger. There's all sorts of things that then become a lot better, and this is actually what for big premium publishers becomes possible when they're switching to this world. But when we then use it in the manner that we're using it together between 95 and Adform, we are actually able to build a sort of replica of that, and thereby for premium publishers to claw back some of the money that's going to Facebook. And that's, for example, just being able to advertise in a proper manner on Safari browsers, something that you have been restricted to only doing amongst a few places on Facebook, for example. So quite a lot of opportunities, in my opinion. The transparency I just mentioned, which you probably don't even get with Facebook. So there's quite a lot of benefits that I really see. So I think success actually could look much better than the world we come from.
Absolutely. Guys, you've been really, really great. This has been incredibly insightful. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you very much and look forward to continuing the conversation. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.